family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on the old Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. If follows aren't your thing, that's fine. I'll gladly take the deed to your house, a blood oath pledging your undying loyalty, or your firstborn child. So whatever's easier for you, blood oath, firstborn child, deed to your house, or a simple follow on Twitter, whatever you got going. Normally, we do a little more of a longer intro here on the show as we start to get into things, but we will be getting into some talk on how the Bills beat the Chiefs and that epic Sunday night clash this past Sunday. But I've got a tremendous guest on the show tonight, as we like to do here on Disguised Coverage. And he's a very popular man. He's a very busy man, but he's taken time out of his busy schedule to join us here on the show tonight. And he's got a limited schedule. So we're going to dive right into it and bring him into the show so we can get into this Titans-Bills matchup here on this episode of Disguised Coverage. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Mr. Buck Reising of so many things.
Yeah.
4-5 The Zone, A to Z Sports Nashville, the install with Greg Cosell, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me here.
What's going on, Anthony? I appreciate you having me on, buddy.
I'm super, well, not super. I don't like the sound of my voice, and I'm kind of self-conscious about it. And I feel like this episode is going to be worse because your voice is immaculate.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's just going to make mine sound so much worse.
Well, listen, I can't do anything to help you in that regard. All I can say is that I have zero other discernible talents other than the voice. So if that makes you feel any better about, I'm sure you're superior to me in many other ways. So if this is the only win that I get on you, Anthony, then I'm happy to take it.
I appreciate you. You're a very gracious guest. I appreciate you lying to everyone like that. You're a good guy. I appreciate it. But again, like I mentioned, I know you're a busy man. I appreciate you taking the time. So we're going to jump right into it, talking about Bills Titans. I know you and I spoke a little offline, going over some run of show stuff. I wanted to flip it a little, start with some things we saw today. So I wanted to lead off with the health of Julio Jones, A.J. Brown. Julio practiced today for the Tennessee Titans, out last week. A.J. Brown returned last week. We know they're strong horses for Tennessee. We know that in conjunction with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, that's a lot of what makes this offense go. So what do you got? What are you thinking for Julio and A.J. Brown? Are they healthy? Is Julio going to play? What do we think the impact they'll have on this game this week?
So I think it's a good sign for Tennessee that A.J. practiced today after playing, because he was on a snap count. He told us that after the Jacksonville game. This past Sunday, Julio Jones is a different story. It's obviously great news. It's the first time that he's practiced in 2 weeks for them. So if you're a Titans fan, you're very excited to see all of that. And to say that he's any kind of a sure thing for Monday night, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. It's what ended his season last year. So his day-to-day availability is basically the reason that his market was so low as far as the trade market was concerned when Tennessee ended up giving up a second-round pick for him. So what I'll say is AJ is a better than likely chance, provided that there's no setbacks. Again, both of them dealing with hamstring injuries. Julio's much more up in the air, and we'll see how he gets through this coming week of practice. It does help that they have a bit of a longer week to get right, given that they have so many injuries across the board.
Yeah, that's a huge piece. And I know, I think when Tennessee traded for Julio, the star power and the impact of his acquisition into this Tennessee organization, I think it just rose like that starting caliber level. But I think a lot of people thought there were depth issues on this team. From an offensive perspective, how important is it to have Julio and A.J. Brown healthy for this offense, especially given the fact that they do want to run the ball? And if there isn't that presence of outside weaponry, teams can just try and really load that box against Derrick Henry.
I mean, it hasn't much mattered against Derrick. He's leading the league in touchdowns against a stacked box. It's the workload is unsustainable. Greg and I just did an episode of the install earlier this afternoon, and he's on pace for north of 420 carries, I believe Greg said, which in a 17-game season, yes, it's expanded, but it is still an unprecedented workload for any running back this century, basically. So, yeah, I mean, it would help if teams feared the passing game, but it's not an end-all be-all. I mean, even if it's not Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, just to have Marcus Johnson back against the Jags over the weekend allowed them to convert critical third downs that they were not able to get against the Jets. Of course, that was one of the bigger upsets in football a couple of weeks ago when New York was winless at the time and has since looked largely inept after the fact. So with just any of their pieces that are missing, whether it is Marcus Johnson who's fresh off IR, whether they get some help for Derrick Henry, given that Darrington Evans has been unavailable for the entirety of this season, and he had a lot of promise as somebody who could be not just a change of pace back, but somebody who could be a threat in the receiving game. Now, Derrick has done well with that this year. He's catching screens, and really that's been their only source of explosive plays between him and Jeremy McNichols. So they're finding ways to do it. It's just how much are you comfortable giving the ball to Derrick Henry? And as the offensive coordinator for the Titans, Todd Downing, told us last week, he hasn't heard anything over the headset that's telling him to stop.
Yeah, it's tough to not want to continue to feed the beast that is Derrick Henry. You mentioned some of the sustainability pieces with Henry. So even just looking at it in a vacuum of this season, leads the NFL with 640 rushing yards, leads the NFL with 7 rushing touchdowns, leads the NFL in rushing attempts with 142. Alvin Kamara is second with 94. So a pretty significant amount or drop off from first to second there. You mentioned that sustainability piece. How long can Derrick Henry continue to operate at this pace? Not only just in this season, but I guess more in like the long term for this Titans offense. He is a physical runner, but he takes tremendous care of his body. He's in tremendous shape. It seems like the more he gets hit, he gets stronger, and the defenders take more damage as the game goes on. Is continuing to just ride him for this offense and him being that focal point, given how heavy his workload is. How far do you think that can continue to go down the road for him, both this year and I guess in years to come for Tennessee?
I mean, I don't think they care much about years to come. I mean, frankly, he's on a 4-year deal. It's structured as a 2-year deal, so they could go 2014 DeMarco Murray with it and just ride him into the ground, basically, which is what ended up happening before DeMarco Murray ended up here in Nashville as the starter ahead of Derrick Henry his rookie season. So, I mean, they see no issue with continuing to do with Derrick what they've always done, and certainly that's why he was paid a second contract. It ends up being great value because he doesn't miss games. In fact, he's missed 1 game over the course of his career in 2019 against the New Orleans Saints at the end of the season. He was load managed, dealing with a hamstring injury. It was a game that literally didn't matter for either team's postseason implications that year. And that was he could have gone if they needed him to go, but he didn't. And it ended up working out in their favor because then he had an incredible postseason run through New England, through Baltimore, and then taking them to Kansas City and losing by 10 in the AFC Championship game against the Kansas City Chiefs that season. So, I mean, it's not something that they're worried about. It's not something that Derrick hasn't proven that he can't handle. And I was somebody who advocated against paying Derrick Henry a second contract. And every Sunday I'm made to look like a fool because he just doesn't show injury. He takes incredible care of himself, as you mentioned. His routine on Tuesdays, their off day, is otherwise superhuman. And I think that he can do it for another season. He's on pace to well eclipse 2,000 yards after doing it a season ago. And no running back in the history of the sport has made it back to the 1,500-yard mark after rushing for 2,000 yards. And there's only 8 of them, including Derrick, that have rushed for 2,000 yards. So it's, he's building a Hall of Fame resume, to be honest with you. And if this season keeps up on the pace, not just of usage, but of production that it does, I mean, this is a legitimate once in a lifetime athlete that I've had the opportunity to cover over the past 6 years. And it's really only happened in the last 3, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. His level of production, sort of being taken in the second round and then kind of like almost being eased into. I remember taking him early in his career in fantasy, and I was like, well, he's a stud. He's going to keep breaking out. And then he didn't. And then I didn't get him for his first breakout year, and I haven't had him since. And I feel like I positively jinxed him, and he's kind of broken out since that. And he just continues to just be efficient and dominate nonstop and be that focal point for the Tennessee offense. And I guess for the team, holistically, they had that strong year in 2019, have a really good chance to go into Kansas City and beat them in the AFC Championship. Don't lose in the wild card game last year to Baltimore, but coming into this year are still seen as a power in the AFC. Super Bowl contender. Then they acquire Julio Jones, and that propels them forward even more. Bit of an rocky and inconsistent start to start the year. Bad loss against Arizona, the loss against the Jets, the come from behind win against Seattle. But where do the Titans sit in terms of what state are they in right now as a team, sitting there at 3-2? Is there still the belief and thought that this is a AFC contending team, potential Super Bowl contender? Has the hype, lessened a little bit? What's the current state of the Tennessee Titans?
No, I don't think anybody who's rationally watched them would say that they're a Super Bowl contender right now. I don't think that they're any better than a division winner right now, and that's largely because their division is trash. The Colts are 1-4, the Texans are 1-4. They have a divisional win, but it's over the Jags at the start of the season, and we all have. It's been well documented what's happening in Jacksonville with Urban Meyer, and how much longer that continues will be a storyline that the world of the NFL continues to follow. But I mean, if they get into the playoffs, that's all that really matters. They had some critical injuries on the offensive line last year. Taylor Lewan was lost for the season with an ACL. They were down to the third string offensive tackle, and Baltimore did really well to neutralize the run game with the way that they were able to game plan for Derek. And they they basically forced Tannehill to try and beat them, and Tannehill was not able to. They were really adept at flustering the Titans offense, and that was an offense that scored north of 30 points per game last year. It was not the issue that you thought would fail them, given that their defense was historically bad in 2020. So, I mean, at this point, I think it's possible that they get healthy. It's possible that they look better as the season wears on, because, as you mentioned, people get tired of hitting Derek, and Derek doesn't get tired of hitting people, and it becomes infinitely more difficult to hit a 250-pound running back when the weather gets cold, and when your body is tired, and when there's an extra regular season game. So, the Julio Jones thing, it's not going to be the difference between them winning a Super Bowl or competing for just a postseason spot. I think if you're a believer in what the Titans are doing, you're more of a believer in what Ryan Tannehill is right now. And it's difficult to say what that is, because he's been sacked 20 times already on the season. The protection has been awful, and he was only sacked 25 times last season in total. So there's a lot of different dynamics to this Titans team right now. Not everything is carried over from year to year, but the one thing that has is Derrick Henry, and that's still not something that people have necessarily had a consistent answer for.
Yeah, he continues. Again, I feel like everybody knows, well, the Titans are going to run with Derrick Henry. They're going to run with Derrick Henry, and he continues to run into stacked boxes and continues to be productive. The offensive line, in terms of pass protection that you mentioned, I thought was very interesting. I was not surprised, but seeing how low they were in pass blocking efficiency, they're 30th in the NFL. The Bills aren't too much better. They're at 25th right now, but they have the fourth most pressures allowed in the NFL this year at 73. And, so you mentioned that in addition to some other kind of warts for this Titans team. At this point, what do you attribute the Titans' struggles at this point in the year to the most? Is there one thing, you to really hang your hat on negatively as to why they've struggled, or is it kind of like a multitude of things that has caused you to see them as nothing more than a division winner at this point?
Well, I think it's the injuries. I mean, they had 24 players on the injury report last week. It's really ridiculous. I mean, Bud Dupree, who they paid a bunch of money for in the offseason, coming off an ACL tear in December. He hasn't played in the last 3 games. They rushed him back. He rushed himself back by his own admission, and I think it's exacerbated the issue with the knee. You have Julio, you have AJ. Taylor Lewan has not looked right coming off the ACL repair that he had done. Tearing it back in week 6 last year against the Houston Texans. Their offensive line is older. I mean, Roger Saffold is really good when he's on the field, but he has missed time almost in every game this season, and they've had to shuffle in a bunch of different parts to try and keep that thing afloat. Ben Jones is kind of in the similar situation. Nate Davis, who was one of the better guards in football last year, has really taken a nosedive, and there's not an explanation for that, other than people speculating, and it's just speculation, but both him and Ben Jones came off the COVID list before week 1, and we have seen documented cases of athletes struggling after dealing with COVID-19. It's unclear whether that's what's happening with Nate Davis, but that's really been the only explanation that's been offered in any way, shape, or form. And then their right tackle situation, they've tried to address it. Isaiah Wilson was a first-round draft pick a year ago. He was off the roster very quickly, had a brief 3-day stint with the Dolphins, and now apparently after almost a full year off of football, he's on the Giants practice squad. Dylan Radins, their second-round pick this year out of North Dakota State, is going to have an opportunity because Ty Sambrailo just retired from football literally yesterday, or at least they put him on the reserve retired list yesterday. So it's feasible that Dylan Radins would see some time, but they've been playing him more at guard than they have at tackle. So it's there's injuries across the board. They haven't looked right even when the majority of them have been out there at the start of the season. And frankly, the starting offense didn't get any real time to work together throughout the course of the offseason. So they load managed Henry. They managed the older offensive linemen. Ryan Tannehill was on the COVID list, and Julio Jones was very quickly removed from training camp after we went up for a ball and came down kind of funky on it. They wrapped him in bubble wrap and they sent him back into the building. So it was always going to be a toss-up. I don't think any, or at least reasonable people, expected them to look the way that they did last year. But you expected something close, and to this point, it hasn't been that on offense, and the defense still isn't great. It's better, but it's not great.
A lot to unpack there. A lot of awesome insight and information from you there. And you finished there with the defense and mentioned some parts in there with the defense as well. A lot of changes on this 2021 Titans defense as opposed to last year's Titans defense, especially from the secondary position. No more Adoree Jackson, Malcolm Butler, Kenny Vaccaro. They pay all that money to Bud Dupree to bring him in from Pittsburgh, coming off the massive injury that caused him to miss the majority of last year. Where are they at defensively right now as a football team? Like, especially considering how poor they were in 2020, are they worse? Are they better off? Where do they stand defensively at this point coming into week 6?
Well, they're not worse. They were legitimately the worst defense in NFL history on third down last year. They were giving up north of 51%. They're much better on third downs. They're much better at getting after the quarterback, even without Dupree on the field. Harold Landry in a contract year has been really strong. The secondary is kind of a toss-up. They have been trying to get Caleb Farley out onto the field. His health has been an uncertain proposition. Their slot corner, the one that they drafted in the 3rd round out of Washington, Elijah Molden, he has been playing a little more, but he played early and did struggle. Jackrabbit Jenkins is it's unclear whether he's much better than what they had last year on the outside. Now, Christian Fulton has been really good, and he is much improved, and his health has been up and down. He's had to leave. He has yet to not finish a game. So let me avoid using a double negative, but he has dealt with injuries throughout the course of the last 2 games, particularly with his ankle. So they're waiting for Amani Hooker to return off IR. He was designated to return today, so they have a 21-day window with which to activate him. Unclear whether he'll be available for the Bills game, but Dane Cruikshank, his replacement, has not been good. They're better, but they're still giving up explosive plays. 11 total after the game against Jacksonville on the season, and it's coming not just with coverage busts, it's coming with communication issues, and it's coming with not sound gap assignment in the run game, as you saw James Robinson do to them early in the first half of that Jags game.
Oof. I appreciate how brutally honest you have been in terms of what you got from Tennessee and what you've seen so far.
It's my job.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know, again, as I let off with, you're a busy man. We're about to get you out of here. I want to ask you one last question before we send you on your way. Coming into this game, Tennessee sitting at 3-2, Buffalo sitting at 4-1. How important is this game for the Titans from both a practicality standpoint in terms of if they get a win, they're sitting there at 4-2. They would leapfrog the Bills in the AFC. From a practicality standpoint, how important is this game? And just from a mentality standpoint, the Bills are seen as a pretty big power right now in the NFL. And if the Titans were able to get a win, that could, be a huge thing for them. So how important is this game for Tennessee?
Oh, it's critical because not only do they play Buffalo on Monday Night Football, they have a short week, Sunday, Kansas City hosting, and Kansas City is not what they are usually, but still a decent threat, as I'm sure Bills fans would acknowledge in the AFC, even if you beat them by 18 on Sunday Night Football. They go to Indianapolis. Those two games will have concluded by November 1st, which is basically the division. And then they're on the road for Sunday Night Football in Los Angeles against the Rams. So it's an incredibly difficult 4-game stretch. The Colts have a similar, will have not as difficult a 4-game stretch. They'll host Houston this weekend. They've got the Jets in the next 4. Of course, they'll play the Titans and the 49ers. So it's possible that the Indianapolis Colts, even at 1-4, could climb back into the division. And then it's not even about seeding in the AFC. It's about just keeping a hold of the AFC South right now. So to be able to beat the Bills, it's improbable for this particular Titans team right now. But I've seen them do some pretty improbable things over the course of the last 2 seasons, and really 3, given what they were able to do against the Seattle Seahawks on the road in the first game back. For all of the insane Seattle Seahawks fan, I've never felt a stadium physically shake like that, but I've never been to Buffalo.
Oh, nice little drop there in respect for Bills Mafia and the Rich Stadium, the Ralph/Highmark Stadium that it is now. Buck, I appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are and popular you are. You were fantastic, as I had hoped. Thank you so much. And why don't you? I know obviously this is a Bills show, but I always think it's important for Bills fans to have go-to people to listen to and follow of other teams for insight and be able to stay up on everything. So why don't you tell Bills Mafia where they can find you and everything you do, just in case I didn't do it justice in the beginning. And let the people know where to find you.
Oh, the easiest way to do that is to keep it short, at Buck Reising, just as you see on the screen below you, and you can get all of the great stuff that I'm doing if you care about the Titans or if you just care about what's happening in the NFL, because we do some great stuff with Greg Cosell as well. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care.
You too.
I'm really feeling good with the string of guests that we've been able to maintain here on the show. I don't want to jinx it, but Buck just continues with the line of tremendous guests. We had Cody Davis for the Houston game. We had Ken Swanson last week for the Chiefs game. Just really been able to hit on all cylinders. So tremendously appreciative of Buck stopping by. Really busy guy. Now we're going to backtrack a little bit for this episode. So, I did the intro briefly because I wanted to get Buck in and be able to get him out in time for his time commitments coming up. But please go follow Buck. Check him out again. I think it's good to always stay up on other teams and just football content in general. Buck is one of the best out there. I was super pumped that he was able to come on the show. Give him a follow. Stay up on everything that he's got for the NFL. The install with Greg Cosell is tremendous. Check that out. And many thanks to Buck. But let's do a little bit of our regular intro type things. I'm seeing everybody starting to flood the chat a little bit. As always, I appreciate everybody stopping by and riding with me live on this episode. As always, any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, philosophies, ideologies, maxims, theorems, anything like that. Appreciate you, Mark, saying I've chosen wisely when it comes to the guests. Anything you guys got related to any of the things I just said, start throwing them into the chat. I like to hit almost any and every question that I can here on Disguised Coverage. As always, if you throw it in with the super chat, it's a higher probability of me getting to it. One, and pretty much just because there's so many comments that come through. If I see something attached with a bright color that flashes on the right, it immediately attracts my eyes and I have a higher probability of bringing it up. But I try to get to anything and everything. As we all know, this show is sponsored by One Pie Pizza. You see the graphic. I get it wrong every week. See the graphic up there I'm horrible at this. The graphic up there in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, One Pie Pizza, delicious sweet sauce, homemade blue cheese. Their philosophy, as I've stated multiple times on the show, is doing one thing and doing that one thing right or as close to perfection as possible. And that one thing is pizza. They are open Monday through Saturday, 11 to 8 or until sold out. And I want to continue to drive home this awesome initiative and thing that they are doing for the entire month of October. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month and kind of cancer awareness in general. So One Pie Pizza, a portion of every pizza sold will raise money to donate to Roswell Park Cancer Institute for the month of October. I love their slogan of join us all month to raise money for Roswell Park to knock out cancer. They've got shirts in the store with awesome graphics, and they're pink and just and the little the boxer up there with the P on the glove. Treat yourself to some good pizza. Treat humanity well, and buy a pizza, get some delicious pizza, and be able to help knock out cancer and help them in this initiative, which again I think is a tremendous thing to be able to use your platform to do some good for the world and the community. So Stop by One Pie Pizza. Get yourself a pie. It's delicious. Help out mankind while you're at it at that time. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage and to Cover One as a whole. That stuff is tremendously important to help us track and trend, as are likes. If you're watching here on YouTube Live or watching later or wherever you are, please drop a like. I know it sounds corny, I say it every week, but it's tremendously helpful towards, again, helping us track and trend and get in front of more eyes and ears. Now we're going to talk about some more Bills Titans stuff before we get into some Bills Chiefs talk, which is very exciting. I'm going to scroll the comments real quick. Oh, appreciate you, James, saying hit the like. Same thing from Michael. Smash that like, everybody. Let's support these guys for the content. I appreciate you very, very much. Very, very much. I feel you, Lone Wolf, saying I wish I had the time to keep up on other teams in the NFL in general. It's tough. I say this for a person who is obviously in the content creation racket that I am. It can be tough. And I love the support for Eric Turner from Mr. Diggs, saying just watching Eric Turner on the Bills defense coverage film room video. Great video. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, Eric is the best. He and I are normally in the film room together every week. We couldn't get some things to align this week, so he put out the episode solo and did a whole bunch of breakdowns and crushed it, as he always does. He is the man when it comes to that content. And hey, Reggie. Reggie's a Titans fan checking in. Appreciate you, Reggie. Welcome to the show. We had Buck Reising here in the beginning of the episode, break down a lot of details and status updates from the Titans heading into this game against the Bills. He was tremendous. And, hold on, timeout. Well, first, I appreciate you, Dawn, saying a great interview with Buck. Buck was tremendous. So purple can kind of be a Halloween color, and also you can't see it, but there's purple and black bats on the tree. So it is Halloween themed. Also, I'm going to be putting some orange garland on there in a little bit. Thank you. See, Chris gets it. Purple is 100% a Halloween color, but also there are bats on the tree. You can't see them, but there's bats in the garland. Oh man, a lot of questions coming in. Mike P, was I on my phone watching NFL games the whole time I was in Italy? The time difference threw a lot of things off, especially that Sunday. The wife and I were doing a whole bunch of activities, so we didn't get back into the hotel until like 10 o'clock at night. And at that point, I just completely avoided everything and then watched the Bills game fresh once I knew I could and once it was uploaded. But it was very hard. I avoided my phone. Family were texting me, so I didn't put my phone on airplane. I didn't want to hear or see anyone. I stayed off of social media. All that kind of stuff. Interesting question from Reggie, the Titans fan. How much is revenge a motivating factor in this matchup between the Bills and Titans? I won't say it's the overarching factor. I think for the Bills at this point, it's very much, even though they said it against Kansas City and we kind of saw through it a little bit, I think they very much take every game to game, and the next game is the most important game because it's the next game, and this upcoming opponent is the most important opponent because they're the next opponent, so on and so forth. And I think just wanting to continue to win and go for that one seed in the AFC is the number one factor for the Bills. But I would say there's maybe a little bit of a revenge tinge in there. I think the Bills have seen all the even though Josh Norman's not on the team anymore, I think they continue to see all of the gifts and videos of Derrick Henry, stiff arming Josh Norman. I think they hear some of the narratives and they know they lost to Tennessee last year, and they go back into Tennessee again this year. Yeah, Roman, I see your comments going in there with that's team speak. Yeah, they wanted the game against Kansas City. I think it was awesome that they showed that team speak though in public. I love that. I don't want to give, even if people are trying to read between the lines or see through things, I don't want to give anybody any ammunition or make waves or put a target on your back any more than the Bills already have. So I love that team speak. I love coming to the podium and just being like, yep, just another game. It is what it is. And then behind closed doors, rallying the troops and letting everybody know how important each matchup is. So I think the Bills do want this win, Reggie. I don't think revenge is the biggest motivating factor, but I think it's definitely a piece. I'll put it to you like this. I think the Bills coaching staff and players, they definitely know that they lost to Tennessee last year. They definitely remember how they lost, how they performed. So that's definitely in their minds. They're very much aware of it. And it's easy to think of it because, again, you're going back to the scene of the crime type of thing. So it's a factor. It's not the dominating factor, but it's definitely in there. Oh, awesome comment from Dawn. Purple is a witch color, and you think Hocus Pocus. I love Hocus Pocus, as does my wife. Purple's definitely a Halloween color. Lone Wolf, I saw your comment earlier saying we differ on Halloween colors. That's fair, but I will be adding some orange Halloweenish. I'm terrible at this. Some orange Halloweenish stuff, garland to the tree, and that's all because of my wife. She decorates everything and sets it all up. She's fantastic. To continue on with some Bills Titans talk, again, Buck was tremendous. I loved all the insight and the context that he added, and I wanted to throw some advanced metrics and some numbers your guys' way when it came to the Titans. We're going to start on the offense. They are in 11 personnel, which we're all very familiar with at this point because the Bills run 11 personnel so much. So the Titans offense is in 11 personnel 62% of the time. 21% of the time they're in 12 personnel, and in 8% of the time, I should say, they're in 13 personnel. So one running back, 3 tight ends, which is the 5th most in the league. May not seem a ton at 8%, but again, not surprising. They're going to feed Derrick Henry. They're going to ride Derrick Henry. Another awesome comment from Dawn. Yeah, Buck's daily radio show is fantastic. Buck is legit a pro's pro. He brings on great people. He works with great people. Again, the show with Greg Cosell is tremendous. He's highly respected. He's awesome. I was pumped as hell to have him on the show. I wish I could have had him on the show for longer tonight, but again, he's super busy and popular. So I was pumped that he was even able to join. I'm sorry, I got distracted. Is this a joke? Hocus Pocus is definitely a movie. You need to see it immediately, Lone Wolf. I'm sorry, no judgment. I feel like, because you are sarcastic at times, I feel like this is maybe a joke, but it's definitely a movie and it's fantastic. You need to see it immediately. Keep watching the show here, but once the show is done, go and watch it immediately. Or, maybe wait until after the Cover One Buffalo show with Greg and Aaron tonight, and then immediately watch Hocus Pocus. It's tremendous, and you need to see it immediately, Lone Wolf. But so again, we know that Titans offense, they're going to go in personnel that favors the running game. And as I mentioned with Buck, and as Buck alluded to, Titans are going to continue to feed Derrick Henry. He is the focus of the offense. He is the focus of this team, and he's killing it once again for the Tennessee Titans. As we mentioned it already, leads the NFL with 640 rushing yards, leads the NFL with 7 rushing touchdowns, leads the NFL with 142 rushing attempts. As I mentioned, second in there is Alvin Kamara at 94, so almost 50 carries less than Derrick Henry. They're just riding Derrick Henry as far as they can go. And Buck had a tremendous comment and point when it came to Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans because of that 4-year contract that really plays like a 2-year contract. They very much could run him absolutely into the ground and then back out of that contract after the 2 years. And Roman knows. Yeah, I do absolutely love myself some Alvin Kamara. Also, for everybody starting to talk in the chat, Hocus Pocus came out in 1993. I know that off the top of my head because I see it a lot and my wife loves it. So yeah, Hocus Pocus came out in 1993. It's fantastic. Yeah, check it out, Lone Wolf. It's great. This just became a Hocus Pocus podcast. That's all we're going to talk about. But yeah, Henry's the focal point, as Buck spoke about, as we mentioned, comes with the stats. We're going to see the personnel formations that favor Derrick Henry. What's interesting, and I think what was really helpful and insightful from Buck, was all the changes on the offensive line, the injuries they've had. Dylan Radins, that second-round pick out of North Dakota State, who I liked coming into the draft, and I thought was a good draft pick for the Titans. I actually liked the Titans draft as a whole. I really liked Caleb Farley. I know the injury concerns were scary for him at corner coming out of Virginia Tech, but I thought if he could stay healthy, granted that's a massive if, he would really be great in the NFL. I would have had no problem if he fell to the Bills in the first round if the Bills took Caleb Farley. I would have gladly taken Caleb Farley there. To answer a question in the chat, no. Oh, Lone Wolf already answered it. But yeah, Harrison Phillips did not play against Kansas City. He was inactive. So I liked Caleb Farley. I liked Dylan Radins. I liked Elijah Molden, another player that Buck talked about, the corner, mainly slot corner coming out of Washington. I liked him a lot. Love the input that he struggled so far this year. Christian Fulton has been killing it as well. Roman, like you mentioned in the chat, I'm going to speak about him when we get to the defense in a bit. But yeah, this offensive line is a little in shambles a bit. Oh, awesome. More support for Buck. Awesome from Mark saying, just followed Buck on Twitter. He's on a pod with Greg Cosell. So a big deal. Yeah, 1,000%. So they're going to feed Derrick Henry. We know this, but in the rest of the passing game, They use short drop packs 73% of the time, which is third in the NFL. So, not deep drops from Tannehill. Very important for the defensive line to take proper angles and get after Tannehill and not allow him to escape up into the pocket or outside and break contain. Basically, what they did against Patrick Mahomes negatively in the first part of the game, mainly on that first drive where they let Mahomes get outside. And then we saw a course correction and they started to compress the pocket and keep Mahomes contained. We're going to need to see that again on Monday against the Titans. They run the ball a ton, primarily a zone running team. 76% zone runs, which is 10th in the NFL, 23% gap runs, which is 20th, and 30% of their runs have come versus stacked boxes, which is 8th in the NFL. I'm surprised that's not higher, to be honest, especially with the injuries to A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. I figured teams more would just be, let's just stack the box completely against Derrick Henry, but it hasn't been. Again, 8th is a lot in terms of running against stacked boxes, but I thought it'd be like first because Derrick Henry is the focal point, especially with the injuries. Henry's just been a monster every week in every shape of the word. Yeah, Roman's awesome comment there. Tannehill has that wide receiver speed. Interesting question here from Mark. Will Tannehill take the underneath stuff that Mahomes ignored? I think this is a very interesting one. There were some openings that Mahomes just either didn't go to or that he went to and did not convert on and made bad throws. I think Tannehill will take that underneath stuff. They are built more towards that in terms of this offense for Tennessee. They, in terms of Ryan Tannehill's intended air yards and completed air yards, he's middle of the pack. Too in time to throw. This hasn't really been a big vertical pressing offense so far this year. Again, I think the injury to A.J. Brown has a lot to do with that, but I think you're going to see more short stuff or taking what the defense gives us from Tennessee, especially given two things: how much they want to run the ball and, like what Buck mentioned, how porous their offensive line has been and how bad they've been in pass protection. I mentioned it earlier in the episode with Buck. They are 30th in pass blocking efficiency, and they've allowed the fourth most pressures in the NFL with 73. That is a large clip. That is a very large clip. And is Reggie, the Tennessee Titans fan, who is still joining us here on this episode, awesome. Reggie with a really good comment. Tannehill's not flashy, but he's incredibly efficient. And I think he's the type of quarterback that will take what the defense gives him, potentially maybe more than Mahomes, but I think Tannehill would do that. And Roman, to answer your question, Julio practiced today. It's no guarantee that he plays, however. It's pretty likely that A.J. Brown plays again, but not a guarantee for Julio at all, although he did practice today. Some raw metrics just for everyone for the Titans. Third in rushing yards per game with 167.8. 26th in passing yards per game at 221, and 10th in points per game at 26.4. I think this matchup coming in for the Bills, obviously the health on the outside is going to be a big deal. Pardon me there. The health on the outside for AJ and Julio, even if they both play, I don't think they're going to be at 100%. I think this matchup now, especially with how the Titans are playing and the health of everybody on the offensive line, on the outside, and the periphery with the weaponry, I think this matchup very much favors the Bills defense, especially with how the Bills defense is playing. I think this game comes down to them focusing on Derrick Henry and being able to stop Derrick Henry again. If Julio's out, that's a big loss for them because it allows the Bills to just play on A.J. Brown and shadow him over the top and potentially bracket him and be able to maintain things in the short to intermediate against Ryan Tannehill, who, again, I think is going to be that quarterback who wants to take what the defense gives him. And if the Bills can continue to get pressure with their front four, which they have so far this year, because the front four has been very impressive, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. If they can get pressure with that front four, especially against an offensive line that has been inefficient when it comes to pass protection, I think this matchup now starts to favor this Bills defense. But again, you still got to account for Henry. You still have to watch for Derrick Henry. He can change the game in the blink of an eye with his speed and his power and size and just how brutal he runs. But again, this focus is going to come down to whether or not the Bills can stop Derrick Henry. The health will be an important factor on the outside for A.J. Brown and Julio, but it always comes down to Derrick Henry anytime you are talking about the Tennessee Titans. When it comes to their defense for Tennessee, a lot of variation in their personnel. You're going to see a pretty decent mix of 3-down rushers, a 3-4 formation. They've also played a 4-3 9% of the time. They run nickel, traditional nickel, a 4-2-5 6% of the time. They do a lot on defense. They're also pretty balanced when it comes to their coverage over the top. They've been in a 2-high shell 46% of the time and a 1-high 42% of the time. So pretty balanced when it comes to how many safeties they have over the top for their defense. 54% of the time, they use a 4-man rush. 25% of the time, they use a 3-man rush, which is very, very interesting to think from the Titans' perspective. And they only have a 21% blitz percentage. I think their rush package, in terms of 54% of the time being in a 4-man rush, 25% of the time being in a 3-man rush, I think that's a very interesting thing to consider coming into this game against the Bills for Tennessee, because we've seen what teams have tried to do versus Josh Allen so far this year, and really even towards the back end and back half of last year, which is not blitz him and not get beat and gashed, but play more 2-high safety, play more coverage in terms of 7 and 8 in coverage, and only rushing 3 or 4. If you can get there with 3 or 4, you can affect the Bills tremendously, as you could any offense. We saw that in week 1 with the Steelers. TJ Watt and Cam Hayward had their way with the Bills up front. They didn't need to blitz to get pressure on Josh Allen. They were able to drop 7 and 8 at times into coverage and just create chaos and havoc up front with the front 3 and front 4. If that happens, that can be problematic for the Buffalo Bills. Harold Landry is a stud for the Titans defense, as Buck mentioned. Even without Bud Dupree really playing this year, Harold Landry has continued to do well, and being in a contract year helps. But I don't think they have the horses up front to affect the Bills' pass protection if they're just rushing 4. Now, the coverage on the back end is something that is very interesting. And as Lone Wolf even, mentions here, dropping 8 into coverage against a passing team will be interesting. It will be interesting because if you're only rushing 3 or 4 and you don't get home with those 3 or 4, you can get picked apart. We saw that with the Bills versus Chiefs, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here. The Bills didn't have the most efficient day on offense against the Chiefs. Josh Allen was 15 of 26. We would expect to see a better completion percentage out of him, but they hit huge, big plays, shot plays over the top. And part of the reason they were able to do that was because Josh Allen had time in the pocket, or he was able to escape, get outside the pocket, create, and make plays. If you're going to rush the Bills with 3 or 4 and you do not get there with 3 or 4, you open yourself up to big plays, chunk plays, toxic differential type plays that Aaron Quinn loves. You also open yourself up to the potential of Josh Allen running and just scrambling and getting yards that way. So if the Titans are going to sit back and just rush 4 or rush 3 and play coverage on the back end, they're either going to have to play amazing coverage on the back end, or they're going to have to get pressure with that front 3 and front 4. And with the health of the defense where it's at, as Buck mentioned and went into tremendous detail, I don't see that potentially happening. As Reggie, the Titans fan who has been in this episode for a long time, again, appreciate you stopping by, Reggie. Hopefully you're still with us. Reggie mentioned Christian Fulton, the corner for Tennessee, has been their best player on defense. He's had a strong year. He was a guy who I would have been fine if the Bills took him in the draft last year instead of AJ Epinesa. So Christian Fulton has really held strong on that back end, but the rest of the defense holistically has not so much. Again, Buck mentioned their struggles so far this year, a lot of it being injury based, but there is some talent deficiency there and some scheme, problematics, some problems schematically for the Titans on defense. And especially considering how much they struggled last year, the only reason they're better this year was just because of how historically bad they were last year. It's going to be tough for this Titans defense to contain the Bills offense. If we're just, again, looking at raw metrics for the Titans defense, they're 24th in points per game allowed at 26. They're 21st in passing yards allowed per game at 264.6. They're 16th in rushing yards per game allowed at 112.8. And they have given, they have the 9th most turnovers from an offensive standpoint. So their offense turns the ball over. They've turned it over 7 times, puts their defense in a bit of a precarious position often enough. That could be another area that presents itself as problematic to the Titans defense. Pardon me there while I take that drink. Yeah, I just don't see I don't see Tennessee having the horses up front to contain the Bills, especially with how they're operating right now and mixing in a little more of the run, being able to succeed against light boxes in the run like they did against Kansas City, which we're going to talk about in a short minute here. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. And again, if you just joined us now, go back, watch the beginning of this episode. We had Buck Reising of 104.5, the zone down there in Nashville. And he's also part of A to Z Sports Nashville. And he does the install with Greg Cosell, tremendously knowledgeable in terms of just being a football guy and a football mind, but obviously on the up and up with everything Tennessee. He broke down a lot of what we're going to be seeing from the Titans' perspective coming into this game. So go back, check that out. But as of right now, I don't like to get ahead, but knock on wood, I am not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. This matchup will be one that I think favors the Buffalo Bills in terms of what the Titans do defensively versus the Bills offensively, and what the Bills are able to do defensively against the Titans offense. As we've seen some of the comments coming in. Starr coming back has been huge. The defense is playing at a tremendous level right now. The rotation continues to be tremendously important to this defense and this defensive line. Again, if the Bills, I've said this so many times in the show, like when the Bills took Rousseau and Basham, we saw implicitly that, okay, they believe that the defense, the most important part of the defense is the front four. And then we saw after the draft, Brandon Beane come out and say, we believe that the defense is built from the front four out. So we saw that, we heard that, we understood, okay, Rousseau, Basham. We understood, okay, that's why they made the additions last year. And everything has really started to work out for this defense as of right now. Again, knock on wood. And Star Lotulelei coming back has been tremendous. When you have a defense that wants to use your front four almost exclusively as your mode of pass rush, you're going to get tired rushing the passer with just your front four. You're going to get tired also because you have to maintain run support. So you have to continue to send the edge and maintain gap integrity in your rush lanes and all those things in both the pass and the run. So being able to consistently rotate bodies up front is a huge, huge thing. It allows you to play situationally. It allows you to match up well on certain downs and, again, in certain situations, and allows you to stay fresh in that second half to be able to continue to have an impact on the game because you're not worn down up front. And it allows you, again, to continue to match your best against the situation of the offense and against the best of the offense. So that rotation up front has been huge. I think with the injuries and the poor play up front from Tennessee, this could be another game where we see that Bills defensive line really start to eat a little bit and impact the game. I would expect to see another big game from Star Lotulelei. I would expect to see another big game from Ed Oliver. I love the comments coming through in regards to Derrick Henry and really trying to get him in the backfield before he gets rolling. That's what Baltimore did in the playoffs against Tennessee last year. They sent everybody to try and get Derrick Henry behind the line of scrimmage or at it, because again, once he starts to get up to speed and he gets rolling and he gets to that second level, he's a very hard man to break down or to bring down, I should say. But I think this matchup, especially with the injuries, it favors the Bills defense here. I think it also favors the Bills offense as well. I don't see Tennessee presenting too many problems. Again, things could happen, but Christian Fulton is a guy to keep an eye on for that Tennessee defense. Harold Landry is the guy to keep an eye on for that Tennessee defense, guys who can make plays at multiple levels of the field. And then offensively, it's Derrick Henry. It's what does Ryan Tannehill do? Does he take what the defense gives him? Does he try to make plays with his legs? Can he get the ball downfield? Do we see more of a vertical presence from A.J. Brown as he's gotten healthier? Do we see Julio Jones play? What kind of impact do they have overall in the game? And I want to get to some comments here. Comment here from Jessica. The best thing about Groot, he sets the edge. I actually won't disagree with that. I like what he's done in pass protection, but my favorite thing so far about Gregory Rousseau this year has been the way he's been able to set that edge and stay strong in the running game. His ability to own the offensive tackles that he comes up against and be able to fill the gap with their body and use his long arm that he uses in pass rush, but be able to use it in run support and keep his inside arm in that long arm and then use his other outside arm as a free arm to either get to the quarterback, but also influence the run and close lanes and shut down holes, be able to spill things to the outside for support from his defenders, but also make the play. Yeah, Gregory Rousseau has been tremendous when it comes to run support this year. Again, a guy that I thought he could be good. I loved the ceiling that he had. I definitely didn't think he would be operating with this level of efficiency and productivity this early in 2021. So everything we're seeing from Greg Russo has been a bonus and a really tremendous thing to see. Question here from Mark. A-gap blitzes from the Bills. I think you're always going to see some level of A-gap blitz, whether it's actually happening or they're just simulating that pressure in the A-gap. I think you're going to see that look a lot. I would expect to see run blitzes to some degree, especially with how successful the Bills were in man coverage against the Chiefs, which again, we're going to speak about in a little bit. I think the Bills might be a little more confident to play a little more man behind the front seven and play a little more man in their coverage scheme. I think you could see more run blitzes against this Tennessee offense to really make Tannehill have to be the one to beat you, to try and eliminate that play action game and just shut down the run. But I think, again, at their core, we're going to see the front four doing the majority of the work in run support. I think the Bills will crowd the box a little bit and make sure Henry is not the one to beat them. But A.J. Brown is still very dangerous. Even if he's a little banged up, he's still a guy to watch for. But as he gets healthier this week, gets an extra day of rest because of the Monday night game. Can't sell out completely against the run, but I think you will see some A-gap blitzes. I think you'll see run blitzes as a whole in order to stop Henry's momentum, not allow him to get going, and really influence that Tennessee attack on offense. As we continue to go, let's see, any more questions or thoughts? Anything in there? Cool. So now we're going to move on to, ironically, move on forward, but go backwards and talk about some things from the Bills-Chiefs game this past Sunday and diagnose how the Buffalo Bills beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And again, if you guys have more questions, thoughts, comments, concerns about Bills, Titans, anything like that, keep throwing them into the chat. Again, I will try to get to anything and everything as much as I can. Excuse me again while I take a drink of water. Oh, man, the temperature change is destroying me this year, 1,000%. So the first thing, I want to leave. Actually, good question here from Daniel. Matt Milano, going to be good to go on Monday. I don't know. And I actually would rather not play him. I would rather let Matt Milano sit. We have the bye week after Tennessee. I would rather just sit and allow Matt Milano to rest. I think we can go toe-to-toe with the Titans without Matt Milano. I don't want to get ahead of myself here with that. I would prefer him to play, but his long-term health is way more important than just one individual in a vacuum game. So even if he goes, I don't think he'll be 100%. And because of that, I'd rather just let him sit. That way he gets 3 full weeks of rest. Hamstring injuries are not something to mess with. Soft tissue injuries in general, but especially a hamstring. I wouldn't rush him back too soon at all. Julio is practicing. Yeah, and good comment here from Taylor. I think Klein can handle run defense. He actually wasn't, pardon me there. I know he's not the strongest in pass coverage, especially, in comparison to Matt Milano, but I think AJ Klein held his own against Kansas City. I also like the physicality that AJ Klein brings and the nastiness and a little bit of the edge that he brings. He had an impact against Kansas City from a physicality standpoint, and I thought he played good as well. Also, when it comes to everybody in the chat, let's not get ahead of ourselves here with different comments. If someone comes in and says Ed Oliver is a bust, they're wrong. So just let them do them and not acknowledge it and stoke that fire. Comment here from Only Sunny. Yeah, agreed. Rest Milano and he gets the bye week too, 1,000%. I think that's like such a big one. I don't think the Bills rush him back, especially after what we saw them do last year where they kept trying to get him back earlier and that pec injury just lingered and lingered and lingered. I think he rests this week against Tennessee. Then he gets another rest week because of the bye week next week. And hopefully he comes back 100% healthy after that bye week. And yeah, Roman's comment here and follow up to AJ Klein. Yeah, he didn't make huge mistakes, which is exactly what we need. He wasn't a liability. He was smart. He was physical. He was intense. It was great. And comment here from Lone Wolf. Taryn is going to try tackling Henry. I would love to see it. I think Taron Johnson can get him down. I would be afraid for his health because I think Taron's going to come in like a missile and just fling his body into Derrick Henry and do what he can to bring him down. But Taron Johnson is not going to shy away from tackling Derrick Henry, and he'll give him everything he can handle. So in talking about the Bills Chiefs, I wanted to lead off with the defensive line. And we mentioned earlier in terms of the rotation and how this defensive line has worked. The defensive line stayed fresh, and the snap count really shows. So Ed Oliver had 54 snaps. Jerry Hughes had 53 snaps. Star Lotulelei had 50. Gregory Rousseau, 36. F.A. Obata, 34. Justin Zimmer, 30. A.J. Epinesa, 29. Boogie Basham, 29. Mario Addison, 28. Depth, spreading out the snaps, using guys situationally, keeping them fresh, allowing them to succeed in the areas that they are best suited to succeed in. Really strong performance from the D-line. Kevin just mentioned in the comments there that the D-line got a good amount of pressure. They did. That first drive against Kansas City I thought was a little shaky. KC, granted, they were aided by some very timely and unfortunate flags for the Bills defense that allowed the Chiefs to continue that drive multiple times. But we saw Mahomes escape the pocket a little bit. We saw the edge rushers for the Bills get upfield a little too much and break contain against Patrick Mahomes, and he got outside and made some plays. And we didn't really see that after that drive. And comment here coming from Mark saying that he was surprised by the Obata snaps. Yeah, I was surprised too. Him getting activated, I think they went with the length of F.A. Obata, and I think they went with the positional versatility. What was nice about, so F.A. Obata had 17 defensive tackle snaps, and then 15 snaps lined up over the offensive tackle. So he kicked inside on a heavy majority of his snaps against the Chiefs. And yeah, same Roman. I love Obata. I loved what he showed in the preseason and in training camp. He had a strong game. I mean, the defensive line as a whole had a strong game. But again, that rotation is so key. And also, F.A. Obata's ability to play inside was very important for this game against the Chiefs. So Gregory Rousseau, A.J. Epinesa, Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, and Boogie Basham were used almost exclusively as edge rushers. So your traditional defensive end roles, they were pretty much outside nonstop, those five. Inside, you had Ed Oliver, Starr, Justin Zimmer, and F.A. Obata. Those four saw the heavy majority of snaps on the interior of the defensive line. That's huge from F.A. Obata. Again, Vernon Butler, no. Harrison Phillips, no. Neither of those guys were active against the Chiefs. So their interior was Ed, Starr, and Justin Zimmer for sure that we knew. And then there you see F.A. Obata active, and it's like, okay, probably he kicks inside, but we'll see. He played almost exclusively inside against Kansas City, and he more than held his own. He was strong at the point of attack in the run game. He had a couple of pressures. He was able to get his hands up and affect Patrick Mahomes with that length. I think length was a key point in the front four of the Bills against the Chiefs in order to affect Patrick Mahomes. I mean, we saw it not just to cherry pick a play, but we saw Gregory Rousseau, get that interception purely because of his length. We saw him set the edge several times because of his length. Being able to get home and get to the quarterback is also an amazing option, but sometimes you can't. And to still make a play, you get your hands up, you get in the throwing window, you get in the passing lanes. The Bills are able to do that with their guys up front because they have length, because they have guys like F.A. Obata and Gregory Rousseau. And it was nice to see, again, Ed leading the team with 54 snaps. He had a tremendous game. It's not going to show up on the stat sheet, but he had a tremendous game in the run and the pass. He was a terror on the inside. He had pressure consistently. He made Mahomes, have to get off platform and have to get off of his spot and his drop back several times. Starr, another guy strong at the point of attack. Jerry Hughes had a better game that I think a lot of people realize. I needed to tweet it, and I don't think I did, but Jerry Hughes led the Bills in pressures that game, I believe, with 8. Somewhere around like an 18% pressure rate. Jerry Hughes had a very strong game. He had a couple really nice get-offs and jumps off the edge to affect Patrick Mahomes. Jerry Hughes had a strong game. A.J. Epinesa a little under the radar, but also played well. We need to continue to see that defensive line rotation going throughout the rest of this year for the Bills to be successful. like they were against Kansas City. And I think one of the major reasons why they were successful on defense was because of that defensive line rotation and being able to keep guys fresh and allowing them to maintain freshness and be able to play situationally. That defensive line was huge. Also, what was huge, the coverage on the back end. Awesome comment here. There were a couple times where, Jerry, especially in the beginning, abandoned the edge. Justin Zimmer would backfill. Justin Zimmer had several amazing snaps where he just out-hustled everybody. There was a snap in the third quarter, I believe, maybe fourth. The third down play to Tyreek Hill. And he tries to cut back inside on Tre'Davious White, and he can't because Justin Zimmer is hustling so hard from the middle of the field to the sideline, forces Hill to cut back outside. They force him out of bounds, and the Chiefs have to go for it on fourth down. Yeah, Justin Zimmer, his hustle and his effort, it's so, cliche and corny to say, I should say, but his hustle is tremendous. It's evident on almost every snap. He's been a tremendous asset. And, Mario Addison was used to drop in coverage a couple times. He had some good pressures. They did a lot of good things up front, and that was a large reason why they were successful. And also why they were successful was the play on the back end, the coverage that they showed. This is 100% not a pun, but the ability of the Bills secondary to disguise coverage this past game against the Chiefs was tremendous. And their ability to vary coverages and do things to affect the Chiefs offense was also tremendous. I have been a massive proponent all offseason of drafting a corner or signing another corner. So one who has a little more speed, more athleticism, one who has more scheme versatility, so the Bills can have more scheme versatility in coverage and on the back end. And a lot of it for games like this against Kansas City, against teams that have speed on the periphery and have weapons outside who can threaten you vertically and in underneath spots where if they catch it and go, they can take off. I was scared in terms of not scared, but worried as to how well the Bills would contend with the Chiefs passing attack if they stayed in zone or they went with man, but they varied it up between man and zone significantly. Against the Chiefs, they would show one look and drop out of it and show something else. Awesome comment here from Nick. Poyer and Hyde are playing out of their absolute minds, covering so much grass. They're just missiles. 1,000%. They really make this defense go. Their ability to both play high, low, too high, single high safety, blitz, play the slot, hook curls, flats, run support, tackle, anything and everything they do, they are so tremendously important to this Bills defense, and they were key in this game. The Bills defense fluctuated back and forth multiple times between man and zone on defense, and several times, especially for big plays, they would go with a single high cover one. So cover one, it's the name of this network. Fantastic. 2, cover one, for those of you who don't know, that's you're running man coverage on the outside or with your secondary, running man coverage on the defense. And then the cover one is in reference to the single high safety who is in the middle of the field. We saw that several times from the Bills defense. And the other safety, whether it was Poyd or Higher being the cover one, single high safety, the other safety would come drop down and try and take away things in the middle of the field. That's called like a robber, right? So when you have that kind of man coverage, single high safety, and the other safety drops down in the middle of the field at the last minute, that's a cover one robber. The Bills did that several times. Once on the fourth down stop where Jordan Poyer deflected the ball in the middle of the field, almost came away with an interception, but got the stop and forced a turnover on downs. The other time we saw it in a significant moment was that interception for Micah Hyde that led to the pick six. They ran zone. So this is all like one giant connection piece, right? They ran zone early in the game. And Tyreek Hill beat Tre'Davious White off the line, got inside, caught it, first down. They showed that same look on another third down, right? The Bills defense did. They showed that same look like, okay, we're going to go zone again. But it was cover one man with a robber. So Tyreek Hill crosses over the middle. The Chiefs love to do that. They love running drags and crossers over the middle. They love mesh concepts, all that kind of stuff. And Tyreek Hill goes inside and he beats Tre'Davious White inside, uses the defenders in traffic and garbage across the middle to get underneath that and make Tre'Davious White have to go over the top. But he also beats him off the line with his speed. But that's okay because Micah Hyde knew that that play was coming. He's the robber on that play. And he waits, makes it look like it's going to be a too high coverage. And then right before the snap, he starts barreling down. He robs that underneath route. He plays it high to low. He goes to Travis Kelce first. Then he sees Hill is open. He sees that Mahomes is going to go to Hill. So he forgets being high with Travis Kelce, goes low. If Hill makes the catch, Micah Hyde has him and it's a 4th down. Hill doesn't make the catch. It gets deflected. Hyde picks it. Interception. I can't talk about those plays enough because Patrick Mahomes is tremendous at reading coverage. He is very, very good at identifying things pre-snap. We all talk, well, everybody talks about his ability to escape the pocket or his arm strength or the no-look passes and all these things. But the mental side of Patrick Mahomes' game is very, very strong. He knows what's coming. He can take advantage of the blitz. Granted, he has the athleticism and the talent around him and the arm talent to adjust on the fly and make things happen last minute, but he's very good pre-snap. He's very good at understanding who's blitzing, what coverage is the defense in, who's the mic, identifying fronts, all that stuff. Appreciate you stopping by, Anthony. Thank you very much. I know the time change to the Wednesdays at 7 has been a little difficult for you. Love that you joined the live show. Appreciate you. Also, I know a lot of people have been doing comments on the last several videos. I've been having a weird thing where my comments aren't showing up on YouTube. I just realized that. So for those of you who have been commenting, I've been responding, but you haven't been seeing it. I sincerely apologize for that, and I'm rectifying that. So if you've been commenting things and not seeing anything from me on the YouTube videos, I apologize. I thought I was this whole time, and then I realized they weren't showing. So apologies for that. But back to it. Yeah, the Bills defense did something to Patrick Mahomes that we really haven't seen. They confused him pre-snap a lot. They showed him one look and would drop into another. They would show him man and play zone. They would show zone and play man. And they varied in those looks significantly. And to see them do that and confuse Patrick Mahomes and to see them make the Chiefs' offense inefficient was huge. That's the biggest thing of how this game was won. We knew the Bills were going to score on this Chiefs defense. We knew the Bills could move the ball against this Chiefs defense, but I don't know how many people thought the Bills defense would hold the Chiefs to only 20 points. I don't know how many people thought the Bills defense would turn the Chiefs offense over 4 times and to see what would happen with the pressure and all these things. That was a tough thing to kind of predict and see, and the Bills defense did that. And just for perspective on some of the looks that the Bills gave, you know, again, talking about that too high look and single high safety versus 2 high safeties, they used a too high shell. So again, 2 safeties over the top, Hyde and Poyer. They used that on 91% of the snaps against Kansas City. Prior to that, weeks 1 through 4, they used 2 high safeties 54% of the time and a single high safety 42% of the time. So a jump from a 4-week average, again, their 4-week average, they were in 2 high 54% of the time. Last week, they were in at 91% of the time, a 37% increase in 2 high looks. They adjusted their defense to fit the game plan, to fit what was going on with the Kansas City offense. They knew, okay, we can't sit and just run cover 3. We can't sit and just run quarters. We can't run one thing. We have to run a variety of coverages. We have to be multiple on defense, and we have to disguise coverages and disguise our looks. Make Pat Mahomes think A is coming and then throw him B. And then make him think A is coming and then have A come so we can set up showing B later. Make him think A is coming and then not run A, not run B, run C. They did a lot on Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs from a mental perspective. Granted, they executed on defense, but I really wanted to drive home those points with keeping the defensive line fresh is tremendous. If they can continue to do that and maintain efficiency and productivity, they're going to be a scary team on defense to contend with because they have talent at all 3 levels. And because this defense is so predicated on the front 4, if the front 4 can continue to stay healthy and rotate and be effective, they're in good shape. And now they've added this element on the back end to be able to play multiple coverages and run multiple looks against a top-notch offense. I don't want anyone to get it twisted with what Kansas City is. Kansas City is still a threat in the NFL, especially in the AFC. I think they will course correct to a degree. Their defense, I think, has a whole bunch of issues that are going to be tough to correct, but the offense is not going to continue to be this inefficient. If the Bills play the Chiefs again, I think the Chiefs will adjust. Maybe they'll run more against the light boxes that the Bills are showing. Maybe Patrick Mahomes will start to take what's available in front of him and not try to take these chunk plays. But regardless of that, the Bills have shown they have a formula that can work against the Kansas City Chiefs. Getting pressure with 4, staying fresh with the front 4, but then playing multiple coverages on the back end, succeeding in those coverages, showing different looks, confusing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, and then at the same time executing with those different looks, being able to run a cover 1 robber and play high to low and leverage the space and your fellow defenders and come up with stops and interceptions is a huge thing. They forced Patrick Mahomes into, so 33 completions out of 54 attempts, a 61% completion percentage, but he threw the ball 54 times. He only had 272 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, 8 carries for 61 yards, but 54 passing attempts from Patrick Mahomes, only 272 yards. They made the Chiefs offense inefficient, and they did it with the pressure of the front 4, the freshness of the front 4, and they did it by being able to mix up coverages on the back end. That secondary was huge. Tremaine Edmonds was also huge. We talked about it in last week's episode leading up to the game. The interior needed to be strong. Star and Ed on the line, Tremaine Edmonds in the middle. Tremaine Edmonds had a really strong day in coverage. He was good sideline to sideline. He's put back-to-back weeks together of really strong performances. First against Houston, now against Kansas City, an elite Kansas City offense. He played great. We got standout performances at all levels of the Bills' defense against Kansas City, and they came up with 4 more takeaways to continue to lead the league in takeaways. They got pressure. They played mind games on the back end. They executed. They got takeaways. Man, they really just did a lot of great things on defense, and that's how they built the Chiefs. That's how they beat the Chiefs, I should say, offensively, beating the Chiefs offense with their defense by playing those games. And again, it can't be stressed. This was a big thing coming into this season. Could they play man coverage? Could they vary up their schemes that they were playing on the back end? Could they do what was needed and adjust accordingly based on opponent? They did that in a huge way against Kansas City, against a great offense. They did something that they don't do a lot. They took tendencies and broke them. They played what they needed to in order to get the win. Huge thing. And then offensively for the Bills, I mentioned a bit of the inefficiency they had on offense. We've seen this offense, especially when they've been clicking this year. They have been an offense of, short to intermediate with some chunk plays, but we're used to seeing 7 yards, 9 yards, 5 yards, 13 yards, 8 yards, 6 yards, and they just keep moving the ball down the field and they score. We didn't see that against the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw chunk plays, big plays. Josh Allen was 15 of 26 for a 57.6 completion percentage. Not tremendous, but he threw for 315 yards. He had 15 completions, and he threw for 315 yards. That's 21 yards per completion. He had 12.4 average intended air yards in that game. The highest in the NFL, the average for the first 4 weeks of the year was 10.7. So his average intended air yards, 12.4. The highest going into that game, going into week 5, was 10.7 in the NFL. Lamar Jackson had that. He also averaged 13.2 completed air yards per throw against the Kansas City Chiefs. The highest in the NFL going into week 4 was also, again, Lamar Jackson at 8.6. So almost a full 5 yards more per completion in terms of average air yards against the Kansas City Chiefs. This Bills offense went for chunk plays. They went for shot plays. They went for the throat time and time again. And they didn't do the methodical thing. They didn't, okay, let's get 4 yards here, 8 yards here. They didn't do any of that. They didn't do death by 1,000 cuts. They went death by shotgun to the face multiple times. And they succeeded. We saw the big play to Knox. We saw the escapability from Allen. We saw the big play to Stephon Diggs. We saw the long touchdown to Emmanuel Sanders. We saw them get vertical. We saw them get shot plays a lot, time and time again. I am seeing questions coming through, and I'm trying to get everybody. I love this question from Jessica. Do you think Daboll gets the Las Vegas jobs? I am leaning towards Eric Bieniemy. I think Brian Daboll's fantastic. I think he should get a head coaching job. I don't think he's ahead of Eric Bieniemy in the coaching candidacy ranks. I think Eric Bieniemy should be first up for a coordinator. Actually, maybe not even just amongst coordinators. I think Eric Bieniemy should be first up for a head coaching job. Daboll, I think, is right behind him, but Eric Bieniemy would be my top coaching candidate going into this offseason. Eric Bieniemy is fantastic. Again, he's the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's amazing. But we saw shot plays. We saw chunk plays from the Bills offense. We saw them get vertical. And part of the reason they were able to do that is because of Josh Allen's athleticism and arm and the weapons on the outside. But we also saw strong offensive line play from the Bills offensive line, a unit that did not look good starting the year. We saw a different O-line combination against Houston. We saw that combination continue to some degree against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now John Feliciano was back, so he plugged into left guard. So we saw Dawkins, Feliciano, Morse, Darrell Williams at right guard, Spencer Brown at right tackle. We saw a strong game from the offensive line. Spencer Brown, just to touch on him for a minute, his athleticism has helped the run game tremendously, especially on backside runs. His ability to reach and hook defensive linemen, his ability to get to the second level and affect multiple guys on multiple plays. I didn't see him being this ahead of schedule. He's looked good. He looked good in pass protection as well. We saw the Bills run 28 times for 121 yards. This past week, Allen, he had 3.21 seconds in terms of time to throw, which was the third highest in week 5. He was sitting back in the pocket trying to find guys deep. He was extending plays and scrambling and making things happen. A lot of that was due to the protection he got up front from the Bills offensive line. Now, granted, Chris Jones didn't play. Frank Clark was just coming back from injury, and the Chiefs front isn't tremendous. But the Bills offensive line had a good game. That was part of the reason why the Bills beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Their ability to win in the trenches, both on defense with their defensive line and then win in the trenches on offense with their offensive line, was huge. We saw them succeed in running against light boxes that the Chiefs were sending their way, something the Bills did not do well last year. The Bills saw a ton of light boxes in 2020, and they were not good running against light boxes. We saw light boxes against Kansas City. They ran against them, both with the running backs and with Josh Allen. We saw Josh Allen run the ball. We saw him execute QB powers and sweeps. We saw different looks from the offense as a whole and that offensive line. We saw designed, pinpointed attacks from the offense, and we were able to do that, a lot of it because of the offensive line. It was nice to see what they were able to do. The Bills offensive line also limited that, again, like I mentioned, that Kansas City pass rush. The Kansas City pass rush, they had 0 sacks and they only had 10 pressures. By comparison, the Bills defensive line had 3 sacks and 25 pressures. The Bills won in the trenches, offensively and defensively. That was huge for this game. I talked about the defensive line and what they did, but the offensive line, I don't want to say was more impressive, but it may be more important because it allowed the Bills offense to succeed with the game plan that they had and be able to win in a different way. Just absolutely stunning. I'm going through my notes here to make sure I nailed absolutely everything. I also wanted to talk about the Bills offensive line in terms of their personnel in this game. We know the Bills normally, they run a lot of 11 personnel. They run a lot of 12. They ran 12 personnel 43% of the time. This past week, they ran 11 personnel 50% of the time. Prior to that, so again, weeks 1 through 4, their average was 12 personnel. They were under 11%. And 11 personnel, they ran that 65% of the time. So a drastic change. 12 personnel up over 32% for last week versus their season average. 11 personnel down 15% versus their yearly average. Reggie Gilliam saw a lot of time. We saw different looks from not different looks in terms of things we haven't seen before, but more of a focus on a certain aspect of their game. The Bills reduced their splits a little bit, went in more condensed formations and attacked. And it was nice to see from this Bills offense be able to have a focal point and attack. I also wanted to mention too, I mentioned showing different looks and things. I know there's some talk of like the Bills doing things completely different that we've never seen them do before and things like that. But what the Bills did against Kansas City, we've seen them execute these types of plays or operate with this type of philosophy before. What was different was the manner in which they did it with. They were more physical on the offensive line. They were able to execute better on the offensive line. They took advantage of Kansas City's weaknesses better than they had before. But some of the things we saw against Kansas City were things that the Bills did against Kansas City last year, were things that the Bills have done against other teams, but they weren't executing at the clip and the rate that they were executing this past Sunday. And I can't mention this enough, in the overarching theme of how the Buffalo Bills beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They did it by adapting to their opponent, which is the best possible thing you can do to win sustainably and be sustainable in the NFL. It's great to be awesome at like one thing, but sometimes that one thing won't work. If you can vary your attack on offense, if you can vary your attack on defense, if you can be like, okay, we're playing team A this week. They're not good at defending the run. Let's run the ball against them. If you can win like that, and then the next week we're playing team B, they're not good at defending the pass. Okay, cool. Let's pass against them. And then you can win like that. And then at the same time, defensively, to know this quarterback and this team struggles with zone. Let's play zone coverage and win. This team, the way to slow them down is to play man coverage. Let's play man coverage. And you can do that and win. That is tremendous. To be versatile, to be multiple, to be able to face different teams and win based on your different philosophy and your different game plan for that week. You're going to see different things in this AFC. If the Bills play the Chiefs, there is a much different game plan against the Kansas City Chiefs offense and defense than it is playing against the Cleveland Browns offense and defense, than it is facing the Tennessee Titans offense and defense, than it is facing the Baltimore Ravens offense and defense, so on and so forth. And if we go to the NFC, it's the same thing. In order to be, that's a great, Jason, I haven't seen you a lot this episode, but you come in and make an awesome comment here. Jason's comment is spot on. Patriots built a dynasty by finding the players that give you the flexibility to be able to always adapt to your opponent. That is spot on. And then to have the coaching staff now, right? So having a coaching staff that is able to recognize, okay, this is how we can attack this team. This isn't what our normal, mode of operation is, but you know what? It's our best chance to beat this team, so let's do that. That's tremendous. To have that dexterity and flexibility from a coaching and game planning perspective, and then having that flexibility and dexterity from a roster perspective to be able to execute on that different game plan. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I don't want to call the Bills a dynasty yet, but the comment there from Puka, that's what a real dynasty does. 1,000%. And comment there from Brian. You can see what a difference a great GM can do. Look how long we stayed at or near the top under Bill Polian. Then he went to Indy and did the same thing. Yeah. Talent acquisition, whether in the draft or free agency, and talent development are the ways you are sustainably good in the NFL. And then being able to have the coaching staff be able to execute and stay adaptable. I cannot stress that enough. What the Bills did against Kansas City wasn't some brand new nuanced thing we've never seen. We just saw them execute things at a high level that they previously hadn't executed at a high level. They weren't good at running against light boxes in 2020. They were against Kansas City. They weren't really good when they went man coverage, or playing man coverage on the back end isn't their strong suit. They did it really well against Kansas City. They were able to confuse Patrick Mahomes pre-snap. They were able to generate pressure consistently with their front four and rotate bodies. Oh, it was it was a really strong and encouraging performance. I still think Kansas City is something to worry about and be concerned about in the AFC and in the NFL as a whole, but it's nice to see and know that the Bills can go toe to toe with Kansas City. At the very least, they can go toe to toe with Kansas City, but knowing that if they execute, they can run them out of the gym. And also knowing that they have the players and the coaching staff that are capable of executing a game specific game plan designed to defeat a specific opponent. That is tremendous because that's how you win in an individual season in the NFL. But to Jason's comment earlier and Puka's comment, that's how you build dynasties. That's how you continue to win, by adapting, by staying versatile, by evolving, by being able to tailor your team and your game plan week to week in order to beat the different opponents you face each week. No opponent is the same as another. What worked against the Raiders might not work against the Chargers. What worked against the Ravens might not work against the Steelers, so on and so forth. Being able to stay multiple and varied on offense and defense is how you build championship teams. It's how you sustain wins and success. And that was the big thing that the Bills did against the Chiefs. They beat them in a way that shows sustainability going forward. And they executed in ways that show what they did in the beginning of the year wasn't a fluke, especially defensively. This Bills team operated at a high level, mentally, coaching wise, preparation, execution, anything and everything. They beat Kansas City by staying multiple, by adapting their game plan and their team to specifically and strategically attack the weaknesses of Kansas City. And then they broke those defenses and they owned the trenches. That kind of rhymed a little bit, but that's how they beat Kansas City, and it was tremendous. I want to go back to some of the comments here because I saw a lot. Any thoughts on Cole Beasley? I think the game plan last week was a large part of it. You know, seeing more Reggie Gilliam. Dawson Knox, I think, was on the field for, I forget the snap amounts, but like pretty much the entire game. We didn't see really any 10 personnel, so we didn't see a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. I think it was the game plan, though. I mean, again, Josh Allen only had 15 completions. Dawson Knox led the team in receptions with 3, I believe. So we didn't really, it's not like there were a ton of standout performances on offense and Beasley wasn't getting work. I think the last 2 weeks, there were just certain game plans that were put in place. And also, I mean, his presence draws coverage and allows for others to succeed. But I love Cole Beasley being on this team. I think he's a tremendous weapon and an asset to the offense. And he's going to have a big boom game at some point too. But again, there's so many weapons on this offense. It could be somebody different every week. Dawson Knox is now in that mix. So it could be Manny Sands. It could be Diggs. It could be Gabriel Davis. It could be Dawson Knox. It could be Cole Beasley. It could be one of the running backs now at this point. It could be all Josh Allen, like just dispersing the ball. You know, when you have a lot of weapons like that, you're going to have some weeks where guys just don't put up numbers because everybody else is putting up numbers. What else do we got? Comment from Mark. Can you talk about special teams? Are you worried about punter? I thought he was going to pin the opposition in the 20. He hasn't. And punt/kickoff returner. And then Lone Wolf, I see your question. I'm going to get to that too. I'm a little worried about punter from the perspective of Matt Hawk has been inconsistent. He's had some really great punts, and then he's had some really not so great punts. It's definitely something to watch. I'm not looking at it as a liability, but I'm not overly confident in the position. I think it's always like every time Hawk punts, I think it's like a 50-50 toss-up on whether or not we're going to get an awesome kick or a bad kick, and that makes me nervous. As far as punt and kick returner, I'm fine with it being McKenzie. I still don't think he is the most secure when it comes to securing the ball and not dropping it or making the right decisions in tough times. But I think when he gets the ball in his hands, he's so athletic and explosive. Also, he had that punt return against Kansas City where he caught it in the spin move immediately to avoid the gunner and get some yards. Was really impressive. If he gets the ball in his hands, I like that. I just get a little queasy waiting for him to get the ball in his hands or making the decision on whether or not to make a play on the ball. So That gets to me a little bit. Question from Lone Wolf. Thoughts on our running backs? Singletary or Moss better option, or are they just 1A, 1B type backs? I think the way they're going to be used is still game plan specific. I think the coaching staff favors Zach Moss a little bit more. And I personally favor Zach Moss a little bit more. I really like Devin Singletary. I love his ability to make guys miss in a phone booth. I love his contact balance. I love the explosiveness. I just like what Zach Moss does as a complete back. I think he's the better pass protector. Not that Singletary's bad. Singletary is good enough in pass pro, but Zach Moss, I think, is above him clearly to me. I think Zach Moss is the better pass protector. I like what he does in the passing game, despite the fact that he had that drop against Kansas City. And Zach Moss also showed some shiftiness against the Chiefs. His ability to get extra yards after the catch on some of those dump offs and screens were really, really impressive, especially in the fourth quarter. His ability to just like get skinny and move past defenders, or get skinny and get through the line has been really impressive so far this year. So I still think it's close. I still think it's a 1A, 1B, but I would put Zach Moss as my 1A as of right now. What else? Oh, Trey's comment here of trade Beasley and trade Gabriel Davis for Michael Thomas. I don't think I'm going that far. I love Michael Thomas actually a lot. I actually have a Michael Thomas jersey. But yeah, it's very drastic. That's very drastic. What? Comment here from Luis Enrique Reyes. Do you feel Tremaine is living up to his potential this season? I don't think he's living up to his potential, because I think his potential is like super high. Like, I think his potential is like all pro level linebacker. And I don't think he's playing like an all pro level linebacker right now. I will say he's having a very good year, as I had hoped for. And I also kind of thought, him just being healthy, knock on wood, and the defense returning to form, I thought would help him a lot. He's been stellar these last 2 weeks. I think if he continues on this trend that he showed against Houston and the trend that he showed against Kansas City, I think he will reach that potential. It's going to be hard, though. Again, it's a blessing and a curse. It's awesome to have such a high ceiling, but at the same time, that also makes it really hard to reach that ceiling. Like his ceiling is super, super high. So for me, it's going to be tough for him to live up to that potential. But even if he only gets like 3/4 of the way to that potential, he's still like a regular Pro Bowler and top 7. Like, if he only achieves 3/4 of his potential, he's one of the top 5 middle linebackers in the NFL. If he reaches his potential, he's a top 3 or 2 middle linebacker in the NFL. So I don't think he's there yet, but I'm tremendously encouraged by what I've seen the last 2 weeks, and he's playing much better so far this year. Do I think the Bills at this point do not have a use for Breida? At this point, I think there'll always be a use for speed, especially long distance speed, and taking it to the house ability that Breida has. But with what we've seen from the offense so far, no, I think they've shown success in the running game without needing that long speed. Moss and Singletary have been getting the job done. So as of right now, I always want somebody on the roster who's capable of that. And I also think Breida is an awesome option to have if Moss or Singletary pick up a knock. But right now, I'm okay with just Moss and Singletary. What else? Anything else? Questions? Love this comment from Roman. Zach Moss mauls in pass protection. Yeah, he definitely does. Comment from James. Do you think our defense will play more man coverage holding up tight ends? Mixing up how we defend makes our defense dynamic. I think with the success we saw, well, 2 things. I think the success we saw from the Bills defense, mixing up coverages and playing man against Kansas City, I think that will give them more confidence to operate with that going forward. But I also think everything's going to be game plan specific. I just think now there's more confidence in, if they know, okay, man coverage is the way to beat this team or hold up this player or defend this, they'll do it. I think they'll have more coverage in their ability, coverage. I think they'll have more confidence in their ability to mix up coverages and use what's best based on opponent. Start to wind down here. Jason, people talk smack about Edmonds like he is just good when he is kept clean by his D line. Like that isn't the case for every linebacker in this league. Awesome comment. I've said it so many times on the show. Ed Reed is my favorite player of all time. I watched a ton of Baltimore Ravens games. I think Ray Lewis is awesome, one of the best middle linebackers of all time. His level of play and production is drastically different when he has Haloti Ngata, Tony Siragusa, and Sam Adams versus when he doesn't, which is a big reason why the Ravens drafted Haloti Ngata when they did not have Siragusa and Sam Adams anymore. You need defensive linemen to keep your linebackers clean. That is the case for everyone. Same thing like with Josh Allen. Like, oh man, when you just rush 3 or 4 and get pressure on Josh Allen, he struggles. Every quarterback does. If you can get pressure on a quarterback with 3 or 4, that means you're getting pressure with 3 or 4 and you're dropping 7 or 8 guys into coverage. It's harder to complete the ball against more guys in coverage. When there's more guys defending your guys, it's hard to complete passes. When linemen can easily hit you and get into your body, it makes it hard to run around and make tackles. Awesome point. Anything? Oh wow, we're seeing a ton of comments. Dawn, do you think Stevenson stays on the IR until there's an injury? Yes. I don't think there's a need for him right now. At this point on the roster. Comment there from Spin. I think this is spot on. We don't need the run game to move. We just need the run game to move the chains. Don't really need the run game for home run plays. Yeah, if we can get them, I think that's cool. But we just needed to keep the defense honest. We just needed to convert short yardage. We just needed to get some chunk plays and make the defense have to account for it so we can continue to lean on that passing attack. Anything else? Seeing a lot of Cam Lewis went back down to the practice squad, which is where, I like Cam Lewis, but he's going to be a practice squad guy unless there's an injury that has to really bring him up. And I want to get to this last comment from Spin saying Edmonds shut down the passing game going to the middle of the field against the Chiefs. He was very significant in that. Greg Thompson in the postgame mentioned that he has the wingspan of a pterodactyl, and that really influenced the Chiefs passing game. I will say there were some openings and some holes in the middle from time to time that Mahomes did not take advantage of, but Edmonds played about as well as you can in the middle of the field against Kansas City, especially considering how much Kansas City stresses you as a linebacker and stresses the middle of the field with all their concepts and misdirection and pre-snap motion and window dressing and crossers and mesh concepts and all that stuff. So it's hard to play against Kansas City's offense. It's harder to play in the middle against Kansas City's offense. Edmonds did a tremendous job in zone and then in man as well. So I was very, very pleased with Tremaine Edmonds. Oh, what up, Michael? Putting a comment here. Got to throw the old line a bone. They prefer to go forward than backwards. They look good. They look good. They looked very good. I talked about it earlier in the show. Strong offensive line play kept Josh Allen clean, allowed us to take those chunk plays downfield. They had a good game and really awesome to see Spencer Brown continuing to succeed and play at a high level. Like this comment here a lot. Smash that like, please. Smash that like. And I'm going to get to this last question here from Steven saying, why is it that the Bills fans show hate towards Edmonds, but other coaches in the league look at him completely different? Because Bills fans operate with emotion, and that creeps into their judgment. I think other coaches or players in the league just look at it objectively for what it is. I think Bills fans look at it with their heart more than they do their mind. And I think, and I get it, like it's people's favorite, team, and you want your guys to be good. And I also think some of it is the expectation that fans had when he came in. I've said it a lot. I think people heard about all the potential of Tremaine Edmonds and how big he is and how fast he is and how young he is. And then the Bills trade up and they take him in the first round. Both of those things add more expectation. Then he's come into a Bills defense with Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott coached Luke Kuechly. Oh my God, we got another Luke Kuechly. I think all of those things snowballed and combined to just create this giant mountain of expectation for Tremaine Edmonds. And if he didn't hit it, he was going to get ragged on. Same way with Ed Oliver. People heard Ed Oliver, get drafted and all the comps of like, oh, he's going to be like another Aaron Donald. And so everybody expected him to be like an all-pro and defensive MVP in his first year. And when he wasn't, everybody was like, he's a bust. He's terrible. Oh my God, he's awful. Last year, he didn't put up 15 sacks like Aaron Donald because he was getting double teamed every other play without Star, and people didn't see that. They just saw that he didn't have 15 sacks and were like, oh my God, he's a bust. It's that level of expectation that gets sent or that gets set, combined with the emotion of them being attached to your favorite team. And this was awesome. Awesome comment there from Don saying hit the like button. No, this is also a great point from Jason, who else said Bills fans are also watching the broadcast angle and don't see Edmonds and what he does like a coach who is seeing the whole field. Perspective bias, literally. I will say that's an excellent point. I didn't even think of that, Jason. Being able to see the all 22 every week allows me to see the game from a holistic perspective and understand, or try to best understand what everyone's assignments are, what everyone's responsibilities are, and then understand what each individual player's role and functionality is in those schemes and those assignments, and then being able to connect it all by visually seeing everything and understanding it and connecting the puzzle pieces. That helps me understand a lot because that's the way I can see, okay, player A isn't showing up on the stat sheet, but he had an amazing game because of what I saw from the all 22 coaches film versus someone who just sees the broadcast, doesn't see all the angles, and then looks in the stat box and sees, oh, he only had like one tackle. This guy sucks, but he didn't see everything else that happened in the game. So that's a big thing too. And I think that is going to do it. I'm going to throw up the toodles, you guys. We've been doing this for an hour and 40 minutes. I didn't think this episode was going to go that long tonight, but it did. We got the Cover One Buffalo show coming up in 18 minutes at 9 o'clock. That's going to be tremendous. Greg and Aaron always bring it on Wednesday nights at 9. So check out that show. Thank you very much for riding with me on this episode. Tremendous guest in Buck Reising to start off the show. Awesome insight and detail into the Tennessee Titans and into what this game could be for Tennessee and what it means, what we can expect to see from Tennessee. Thank you guys so much for riding with me again on this episode. Ton of live viewers, ton of engagement, ton of people active in the chat. Again, riding with me for an hour and 41 minutes. Thank you so much for riding with me live here on this episode. If you didn't ride with me live here on this episode and you are watching this later or listening later on whatever platform may have you, please rate and review and subscribe. Drop a like, but also just thank you for your listen. Thank you for your view. Again, I love the live engagement, but I'm fine with the listens and views, however they come. But again, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage, to Cover One. It helps us tremendously to get in front of more eyes and ears, the more likes, rates, and reviews and subscriptions that we have. I mentioned One Pie Pizza, sponsor of the show. They are tremendous. Go out and get yourself some One Pie Pizza. They are on Twitter at One Pie Pizza WNY. Also, their online menu is in the episode description on whatever platform you are listening to this episode on or watching this episode. Underdog Fantasy, partner of Cover One. Use the promo code Cover1 when you download the Underdog Fantasy app and get a free $10 when you deposit $10. Underdog is tremendous for best ball, daily parlays, just prop things, tons of awesome stuff from Underdog. We love their partnership. Download that app. Use the Cover One promo. That's Cover One, all one word, cover and the number one. Use that promo. Get yourself a free $10 when you deposit 10. That is also in the episode description here, wherever you're listening or watching. Also, I want to talk about the Cover One premium content that we have. I think this is something that needs to be talked about more, especially as the season starts to ramp up and get going. We offer Cover One premium content, which gets you early access to new content. It gets you access to us, the contributors and content creators. It gets you access to the premium Slack channel, which literally everyone who's a member of Cover One is in, along with hundreds and hundreds of other people. It's just like a giant group chat where you have access to everybody at all times. We're constantly talking about the Bills and other teams and film and all this stuff. So you get the premium Slack channel. You get in-depth written content from guys like Rob Quinn and Kyle Salagi. They put up awesome stuff in the Cover One premium section on cover1.net. And you also get in-game breakdowns. Tremendous stuff. $4.99 a month, $39.99 a year. I wouldn't pump it if it wasn't legit. I think we are the best at what we do when it comes to breaking down the Buffalo Bills and breaking down football content in general. and nobody does the X's and O's like Cover One. So check out the Cover One premium content. It's awesome. I'm seeing all of the awesome stuff come through in the chat here. And appreciation from me. I wish I could pull up every single thing from everyone, but I appreciate all the kind words. I appreciate the support. I appreciate all the live views, the later listens, anything and everything. Thank you guys so much for your constant support. Please drop a like, rate and review, and subscribe. Do something for the next 15 minutes and then jump back onto the Cover One channel to catch Greg and Aaron with the Cover One Buffalo show at 9. They're going to crush it as they always do. Thank you guys so much. I wish I could properly explain in words how much your support means to myself and the entire Cover One team. Thank you guys so much. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones all stay safe and are doing well. And as always, I will see you next week, and go Bills.